So, ladies and gentlemen, come here. We're starting the afternoon session. And we're starting now.
Ja, filmagem.
Yes.
Okay, now we go some ask Mr. Kučera. Sorry.
It's all right, it's all right.
Yeah. And let me introduce our Vietnamese colleague. That's right. Mr. Lee. Come on. Is that more or less? I'm sorry. How do you pronounce your name?
Lý Toàn Thắng.
I'm sorry.
Hey, wait a moment. Thank you. Show the diploma. Okay. Thank you.
My last words. I remember that in Vietnamese, there are a good idiom. Staying is loving. Living is missing. I love you and miss you.
So, nice journey, safe journey back to your home. And I now would like to ask our colleague, Professor Pacelaj, to come to present his presentation. I'm afraid we do not have much time for questions or comments. However,
Oh, microphone.
I'm sorry?
Microphone or shout louder.
Yeah, and so I would ask the other Louis from the company, and then because there is no other speech, right? So we can have, we will have some room for questions or comments on every speech you choose. Okay, is that all right with everybody? Louis, is that all right with you?
Yes.
Oh, there is one. Okay, go ahead.
Problems exist in the mental lexicon, in the brain, and they are somehow folded to small relicts, and they can be unfolded at any time. That's what means the cognitive structure exists in our brain, not to confuse with dictionary entries, please. And the example was so excellent, this example when the daughter said, the apple really, no, but hell far from the tree. And you see this blending of mental spaces. I must quote another linguistic discipline. It's called blending theory. Everything concerned with figurative units are only in our brains and not in words in some dictionaries. So we can evoke other figurative units at the same time. For example, the devil and the hell. And the apple.
Okay, now for our third and final speaker of the morning session, Karel Kučera, who will be speaking about 19th century proverbs as instructions for life.
Okay, basically I'm going to speak about the collection of proverbs authored by Jan Slaviborg Nedelhans Liblinski, which is a strange name, probably at first sight. but his real name was Jan and Knedl Hans. But we are now in the Czech national revival period, when people with German names used also patriotic first names or middle names. Slavibor, it's a non-existing name, but it has nice and nicely sounding Slavic roots. Yes, there are two. And Liblinsky, he was born in a village called Liblin, and so he used this one for patriotic reasons. Well, Czech national revival, a few words about that. Czech lands at that time were part of Habsburg Empire, actually from the beginning of the 17th century. The higher education was available in German or university education mostly in Latin, not in Czech. And there was a pronounced interest in Czech history before 1620, which was the battle on the White Mountain when we lost our independence. And we don't have a proud history like some big nations, like, for example, Americans, because when there was a war, the armies were coming and going. We were always on the losing side, with a couple of exceptions back there in the 15th century. And now we were part of actually another empire, another state. And so the Czechs were concentrating on the more proud and eventually even glorious history before 1620. And they were interested in traditions and folklore, because that was the history when we were not part of any other country. In the first half of the 19th century, these interests in folklore, traditions, and so on, partly coincided with a general pre-romantic and romantic shift in orientation from contemporary civilization or civilizations in different countries to distant past and authentic national cultures. So this orientation towards the folklore and history is obvious also from the preface of Knedl Hans Liblinsky's compilation or collection of proverbs. He says, "It seems to us that where philosophy has not pitched its organized tents, the nation's wisdom and wit have been kept in the memory of the nation to be worn as a beautiful vestment and to substitute the diverse confusion of distorted and exaggerated philosophizing." So the shift from contemporary science, from contemporary philosophy to the distant past and the previous times. Also, given the changing flurry and swarming of philosophical systems, it seems to be timely, even absolutely necessary, to be more attentive to national proverbs as results of thousand-year wisdom and experience, and to gather the sparks of this wisdom and the fruit of this experience at one place, presumably his book, which the nation could draw light and heat, and so to say, warm itself up at its own fire. So that's the reasons. Now, the good question now is, why do I speak about this all about forgotten collection of proverbs? Pretty soon after its publication in 1848, it was overshadowed by a much larger collection of Slavic, not only Czech proverbs, by František Ladislav Čelakovský, which now still is observed as the collection of proverbs of Czech ancient Czech proverbs and the proverbs of the 19th century. Now, this is almost forgotten, but it's not so bad. The reason why there are three reasons why I speak about this collection. First, at the time of its publication, it was the largest, far and away largest collection of Czech proverbs in its time. Now, if you look at contemporary new Czech collection of proverbs, you will find that they are 300 something items there, maybe 400 and something. This has actually more items, and I will speak about that. The other reason is a distinctive concept of the collection. If I say distinctive, I don't mean that it is very good or especially good or great. No, it's simply sort of different from anything what we had before. And the third reason, sort of strange, is the inclusion of period proverbs, or proverbs because he calls them proverbs and we would not, with patriotic, sometimes even nationalistic overtones. Now, so the largest collection. It was the largest for 4 years only, as I said, because it was overshadowed by František Ladislav Čelakovský's folk wisdom of the Slavonic people, which includes about 2,100 proverbs. It's hard to count because, well, sometimes there are two proverbs combined in one and so on. Now, in Liblinsky's collection, we will find 1,847 proverbs. The question mark is there because it was a very cheap print. And for typographical reasons, sometimes you have two proverbs at one line, on one line, with some space between them, but you are not in many cases sure whether this should be one proverb with two parts or is it two proverbs and so on. So it's hard to count. But it was published in 1848, and I wonder whether the number of proverbs in this collection is a random number or if it is a premeditated, like number. 1848. This is my calculation, 1847 proverbs, but some other people probably would arrive to different results, like two more proverbs, two less, and so on. So maybe it is not, maybe it is. Many of Liblinsky's proverbs are not attested in older collection, which makes it very precious. However, interestingly, some of them are not included in the bigger collection published 4 years later, the Čelakovský's folk wisdom of the Slavonic people. The reason, I don't know. I actually wonder what the connection between two men was. Were they friends? Were they rivals? I have no explanation why Čelakovský did not include all proverbs of or all of those that are proverbs, probably by any stretch of the imagination, into his collection. Because he must have known about it. There were very little intellectuals, Czech intellectuals in the Czech Republic, in the Czech lands at that time, and he must have known about this collection, but he did not do that for some reason. Well, are the unattested proverbs in Liblinsky's collection real proverbs? Well, mostly so, yes. Some of them are variants or extensions of attested proverbs, like the first part, hle meždi v škořepině nejlíp, a snail feels best in its shell. It's an attested proverb, probably somewhere in the 14th, 15th century. However, he added to it, and a priest in his presbytery. It was not there, it never was there, so that this is a sort of new proverb, but not really. It's just an extension of the old one. Some are likely first records of proverbs so far unrecorded in Czech. They have familiar proverbial forms, proverbial structures, imagery, and so one can believe that simply they are proverbs that happen to be that were not actually recorded before. Like, nemůže-li pesko zhrísti, bude jí lízati. If a dog cannot chew at a bone, he will lick it. So, most unattested proverbs in that collection are probably real proverbs, not something that would be created just on the spot. However, are all proverbs, unattested proverbs, real proverbs in that collection? Definitely not. Some are quotes or paraphrases like, a wise man does not punish because a rule was broken, but for the rule not to be broken in the future. This is actually almost precise quote from Jan Amos Komensky or Johann Amos Comenius's didactic, or the art or artful education, and it's one of the principles mentioned there. Many are not non-proverbial educational, often rather moralizing, revival-oriented statements like, "Girl, you would be disparaged if you were not well versed in your mother tongue, or rather best versed in it." This is no proverb. It's simply maybe it was used somewhere as something that should be said to children, but it's not a proverb, definitely. So, definitely not. Not all of them are proverbs. Now, about the distinctive concept of the collection. He, that is Liblinsky, writes about his ideas and principles in the preface of the book. He said, and he always says, unlike our predecessors, so he was trying to give it a different form, different organization, and so on. We divided our collection into proverbs and sayings. This is true. He was the first to do that, because before that, yes, the authors usually said, well, there is a difference between proverbs and saying, and well, more or less wrote something in the difference in the preface, but then what followed was alphabetically arranged or so, and there were proverbs and sayings and whatever, the similes mixed together. He was the first one to really distinguish them in the collection, in listing the proverbs, listing the items. According to him, proverb is a comprehensive statement including a complete thought about the world or morals. Not bad, actually. It's, yes, quite general, but it's not a bad definition. Or saying is more like a witty idea, a phrase with no special deeper intention or meaning. It is rather than an evidence of the nation's wit, it is an indication of the nation's healthy, cheerful mind and its brighter temper. Well, I don't know, yes, but the difference is more or less clear. If you like more poetic definitions, you can probably use this one. Proverbs are blossoms shaken down from the tree of national knowledge. It's very poetic, but I wonder how good the metaphor is, how fortunate it is. Because if you shake down the blossoms from the tree, it will bear no fruit. So that, I don't know. It's a nice metaphor, but there's this little soft spot. Well. Another quote from the preface, can a nation find out about its own nature and sentiments more clearly than in this mirror, meaning the collection of proverbs, where both good and bad experience of both extraordinary and ordinary people have merged? So he now looks at the proverbs as a mirror where we can see ourselves. And again, what he says is, unlike our predecessors, we attempted to avoid foreign proverbs and saying, perhaps to reflect our typical features. However, it is quite impossible to keep away from foreign influence, but we only tried to use such proverbs that do not patently contradict our nation's nature and do not seem to be unnational according to the general opinion and uses. How he did it, he does not go into that very deeply, but obviously there were some criteria, and he tried to avoid the obviously foreign proverbs. He did not quote, or obviously tried not to quote, Latin classics and so on. Our proverbs and sayings are standards for our people. Now we come to the prescription or instruction in handling in handling crucial moments of their lives. Unlike our predecessors, again, we tried to give this collection a more practical form, having organized all the proverbs into separate categories to meet every need. So he obviously expected that people will, say, oh, I'm in trouble, and so you will look up the page and say, oh, it says this, and so I will follow the proverb. Moreover, we have arranged the categories in a kind of logical way, intending to make the collection somewhat similar to the people's morals. I don't know exactly what he means by this, but yes, he tried to arrange it so that you can look it up. It's not arranged alphabetically, it's arranged, like more on the semantic basis. So he's going to sort the sparks of the wisdom and fruits of experience, and he did it in this way. He divided all the proverbs in 39 categories. Then there is a second section of the non-proverbs, the sayings, okay? But I'm speaking about this proverbial section. And the categories were, if you want to undertake or accomplish something, and now proverbs would follow: prudence, courage, experience, opportunity, time, caution, vigilance, speaking manner, master, workman, master, servant, superior, subordinate, and so on, friendship, love, female gender, marriage. The ideas of 19th century proverbs about women are sort of strange. I won't go into that, although it would be probably interesting. Home, parents, children, homeland, God, virtue, morality, and so on and so on. Diligence, frugality. And at the very end is a sort of vague category, peasant, which includes farming proverbs and meteorological prognosis. Now, these 39 categories are all right, probably, and most of or sections, and these sections, most of them are divided into subsections, and these subsections have headings expressing the general sense of the listed proverbs, using the imperative where possible to make it, like obvious. Oh, here you will find the instruction for this problem, okay? So, for example, the section, if you want to undertake or accomplish something, has subcategories called always use the right means, thorough means to an important purpose, simple ones to a simple purpose. Use diverse means. You will not achieve your purpose with inappropriate means. Where directness does not work, add a stratagem. Plead. Fight out a weak spot of the one you are going to deal with. Try to win over his friends, and so on. Now, in each subsection or section, some of the sections do not have subsections, the general instruction formulated in the heading is expressed metaphorically with the listed proverbs. So the section, if you want to undertake or accomplish something, has a subsection, for example, you will not achieve your purpose with inappropriate means. And now come the proverbs. Most of them are unattested, in Czech, in the older Czech collections. Do not mend sags with a silk thread. Eat puree, but do not cut it with knife. You will not catch a hare riding a cow. It is hard to kill a crow with a wisp of straw. Do not ring a cracked bell. Do not chase a wolf riding a limping horse, and so on. Another example section, humility and pride. Do not long for heights is the subsection or the title of it. And it lists proverbs like this. Who looks at the sky and walks on the earth will easily hurt himself. Do not mount a horse, you will not fall down. Do not climb a mountain, you will not fall down. He who flies high will fall deep. The higher the hill, the deeper the valley. The higher the tree, the closer the lightning. The higher one is, the less safe he is, and so on again. Well, to build a collection around this principle of instructiveness is in a way understandable. I don't know, 2 or so years ago, I counted the grammatical categories in Proverbs as their frequencies in Proverbs, as opposed to their frequencies in the Czech National Corpus as a neutral background. the frequency of the imperative in Czech proverbs is almost 7 times higher in proverbs than in the common language. So that, yes, obviously many proverbs are instructions, are commands in a way, recommendations, advices, and so on. So it was natural. But could you do that? I mean, can you follow the reason and go around the world of proverbs, finding instructions, advices everywhere? No, you cannot, of course, because there are proverbs like bohatému groš chudému dítě, a coin to a rich one, a baby to a poor one. The meaning is sort of vague proverb. The meaning is the luck is blind. The good luck should give a penny, some money to a poor one, and babies to the rich one, but very often it happens otherwise. Sedlák se neumí skrýti, and so on. A peasant cannot hide himself. Even if one pushes him under a bench, his boots will stick out. This is no instruction again. Moreover, instructive proverbs occasionally contradict each other, as we know, and consequently can hardly be standards for our people in handling crucial moments of their lives. Like, kdo do tebe kamenem, ty do něho chlebem. If someone throws a stone at you, throw bread at him. Versus insult for insult, blow for blow. And if we look at those non-instructive proverbs, we will see that they are concentrated in 2 sections, actually, of the book. One of them, of course, are meteorological prognosis, of which we heard a lot this year. Proverbs like Zelené Vánoce, or Green Christmas, White Easter, Warm October, Cold February, St. Matthew breaks the ice, when there are mushrooms in abundance, there is not enough bread, and so on. And the other part is actually the third reason why I was mentioning this book, that is the patriotic or even nationalistic proverbs. Patriotic section, vlast, homeland, vlast, love, subsection, love your homeland and your tongue. And that includes proverbs like protisvek, who does not love his homeland fights against his own blood. There's no instruction either. Czech country is the mother of bread, no instruction. Nobody has traveled as far as not to hear the bells of his parish, meaning that you always recognize when you are close to home and recognize the sound of the bells and so on. No instructions. Then there is the nationalistic part. It's a very bad part from today's point of view. Subsection Czech a cizinec, the Czech and the foreigner. The German wishes well to the Czech when snakes are warming up on ice. That is never. Okay? Now, you have a proverb, or it's listed among proverbs. Germans have nuts on their heads, songs on their eyes, plates on their hands, and nails on their fingers. They must be terrible and strange creatures. However, this is a set of puns, plays on words based on similar or Czech pronunciation of the German words. So yes, nisse means lies and nüsse means nuts, but the Czechs pronounce it the same way. So these are the puns actually: lider and leader, lids and songs, thaler and teller, coins and plays, zähne and zähne, teeth and tens, and nagel and nagel, which is the same word or homonym in both English and Czech and German, but not in Czech. They are 2 different words. So that you know the picture, the image of Germans, because they were the strong element and they were anti-Czech and they were causing that we cannot speak our language and so on. That was the image. So it was ridiculed this way. Sometimes it is poetic, but in quotes. Look at that poem. A bird by a child, a young woman by an old man, a bottle of strong wine by a German, all are treated very badly by them if they get into their hands. So the Germans always are bad. They cannot be simply good in his proverbs, in his sentiments, and so on. Sorry for the German section. It gets worse, actually. Again, poetic. The Czech is an ox, the German is a pole, the Hungarian is green grass, the Frenchman is a red rose. The ox came, the Czechs, proud Czechs, knocked down the pole, the Germans, devoured the green grass, sort of absorbed Hungarians, and I will not tell you what they did with the red rose. Use your fantasy. In the end, actually, this what I was quoting now is not very often quoted here, because the sentiment prevailing here is that proverbs sort of get nations closer, people closer. But these do not. These do the exact opposite. Okay, they making differences, crazy differences, trying to denigrate the other nation and so on. Well, it is sort of understandable in the context. By the way, it's funny that at that time, we used these sort of offensive. Limericks, sort of short, denigrating poems, and trying to build the image of the Czech as the real great guy and so on. No. And now when we are free, if you look at, I did that, the opinion of the Czechs about the Czechs. So and the opinion of German opinion about the Germans and the English opinion about the English. So you will find that the Czechs have very low self-confidence. They always say that we are lazy, the proverbial Czech laziness, the proverbial Czech, and so on and so on. So that now we do the exactly opposite way. But in a way, it is probably natural. So in the end, although tens of the items listed in the collection are not proverbs proper, although the instructiveness does not work as a universal organizing principle of a comprehensive collection of proverbs, and because Libliński recorded some rather special examples of folklore, and I mean the nationalistic rhymes and proverbs, I think that his all but forgotten collection definitely is worth mentioning, because, it's very good that he recorded these offensive poems and proverbs and so on, because we probably would not know that they ever existed, and now we do. And that's about it. Thank you for having listened to me. Thanks, of course, to Marianela and Ruit for making all this possible, and that's it.
Thank you very much, Karel, for an excellent presentation. I think we have time for maybe one question, if anybody has a very urgent question. Fionnuala, and then we'll break for coffee.
Well, thank you very much. Not so much a question, just a couple of comments. You were talking at the end about those enumerative proverbs, where a list of things. And I found with the Irish material I've written about this that enumerative proverbs tend to be derogatory about neighbours and so on. That's,
yes.
As opposed to the other kinds of proverb. And also in collections of proverbs where you have simply lists, it is difficult to know if two items are linked together or not. But I've written about that as well, how you might be able to distinguish, whether one line is just on its own or if it's connected with the one above or below.
Yes.
Thanks again for your, well, the other thing was just, these collections contain so much more, as you say, than proverbs, which is very valuable.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for the comment about the organization of the book. This was the first actually attempt to organize it around some kind of principle, because before that it was at least in Czech, just alphabet or proverbs about dogs, proverbs about cats, and so on. And so this was the first one. Paradoxically, Čelakovský, the one who wrote the big collection, is still credited as being the first to do that, and his organization of the proverbs is not perfect either. It's sort of strange.
Okay, so coffee. Well, maybe a round of applause and then coffee.